She thought she knew who belonged in first class. The moment she saw them, two young black men sitting confidently in uniform, her smile faded. Maybe it was disbelief. Maybe it was something uglier. But one thing was clear, she didn't think they deserved to be there. Passengers watched as her tone turned sharp, her words colder. To her, they were just two imposters pretending to be pilots. She didn't know that behind those calm eyes were thousands of flight hours, and a lifetime of fighting to prove they belonged. As whispers spread through the cabin, tension thickened like storm clouds. The twins stayed silent, composed, professional, while she made a scene that would soon cost her far more than her pride. Because what she didn't know was that this flight wasn't just another job for them. It was family-owned. And the man she was about to embarrass was the son of the jet's owner. What happens when prejudice meets power, at 30,000 feet? For the twin brothers, flying wasn't just a career, it was a legacy. Marcus and Malik grew up surrounded by the sound of engines and the scent of jet fuel. Their father, Captain Raymond Ellis, was one of the first black men in the country to own a private aviation company. From childhood, the twins watched him break barriers others said were unbreakable. Marcus was the calm one, meticulous, quiet, always double-checking every system before takeoff. Malik was the opposite, confident, outgoing, and the kind of pilot passengers instantly trusted. Together, they made the perfect team, rising fast through the ranks of their father's growing charter jet business. Despite their success, the world never stopped reminding them they were different. Even after thousands of flight hours, Marcus still noticed the hesitant looks, the whispered doubts, the surprise when people saw who was sitting in the cockpit. Malik laughed it off, but deep down, it still stung. That morning was supposed to be routine. A short flight from Los Angeles to Miami, transporting a group of executives in their company's newest luxury jet. The aircraft gleamed under the sunlight, sleek, polished, and proudly carrying their family's logo on its tail. As the twins walked through the terminal in their uniforms, heads turned. Some people nodded respectfully. Others stared a little too long. It wasn't new, but it never felt right. While the crew prepared the cabin, the flight attendant assigned to their flight, a woman named Claire, watched the twins from a distance. Her expression was polite, but her eyes, skeptical. She'd worked for dozens of captains before, but she had never seen pilots like these. Marcus noticed the subtle tension but brushed it off. "Let's just keep it professional," he told Malik as they loaded the flight plan. Malik smirked. "Always. Besides, once we're in the air, all she'll see is two professionals doing their job." But as boarding time approached, Claire's attitude grew colder. She questioned their credentials, double-checked their names, and even called the operations desk to verify who they were. Each moment dripped with quiet disrespect, disguised behind a forced smile. Still, the twins stayed composed. Years of experience had taught them that silence sometimes spoke louder than anger. They didn't know it yet, but this flight would soon become more than just another trip in their logbook. Because sometimes, prejudice doesn't just reveal ignorance. It exposes truth and power. The passengers began filing into the jet, polished shoes tapping softly against the cabin floor, briefcases snapping open, laughter echoing in the narrow aisles. Everything seemed normal, professional, peaceful, until Claire's voice sliced through the calm. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stepping toward Marcus with a tight smile. "Only authorized flight crew are allowed in the cockpit." Marcus blinked, puzzled. "I am the flight crew." Her smile didn't budge. "Of course you are," she said slowly, as if testing him. "And yo, partner?" Malik turned, his jaw tightening. "Co-pilot. You can check the manifest." She already had. In fact, she'd checked twice, but something in her just couldn't accept it. Two young black pilots, perfectly composed, flying a multimillion-dollar private jet? It didn't fit the picture in her mind. Passengers nearby glanced up, sensing tension. A few exchanged awkward looks. Others just watched, curiosity tinged with quiet judgment. Claire crossed her arms. "Look, I'm just doing my job. It's a safety issue. I need to confirm this with operations before we take off." Marcus exhaled slowly. He'd been here before, different place, same feeling. The sting of being doubted, questioned, and tested again and again. He kept his tone calm. Do what you need to do. We'll be ready when you are. But inside, his chest burned. Malik's hand tightened on the control yoke. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. Minutes later, Claire returned, her voice clipped. Operations said it checks out. But next time, maybe wear your credentials more visibly. You can understand how this might look. Marcus didn't answer. He simply nodded and focused on the pre-flight checklist, his silence sharper than any reply. As the engines roared to life, the tension didn't fade, it deepened. Every interaction felt colder. When Marcus requested a safety check, Claire ignored him for a full minute before responding. When Malik asked for the cabin temperature to be adjusted, she rolled her eyes. The flight had barely begun, but the unease had already taken off. Half an hour into the journey, turbulence hit, a quick, jarring drop that sent a few passengers gripping their armrests. Malik handled it smoothly, adjusting the controls with practiced precision. Claire, however, rushed in, panic on her face. Do you even know what you're doing? She snapped. Marcus turned toward her, voice firm. Please return to your seat. We're trained to handle this. Trained, she scoffed. I've flown with real captains before. I know what training looks like. The words hung in the air like smoke. Malik's knuckles whitened. Marcus forced himself to stay composed. He had to. One wrong move, one angry word, and the narrative would flip against them. So he stayed quiet. Professional. Controlled. But deep inside, something cracked. Years of endurance, of staying silent in the face of quiet hatred, were wearing thin. As the flight smoothed out, a passenger approached the cockpit, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit. Hey, he said to Marcus with a friendly smile, ignore her. Some people just don't know better. He hesitated. But, you really are the pilot, right? The question hit harder than any insult. Marcus nodded, voice steady. Yes, sir. I am. The man nodded awkwardly and walked away, leaving behind an echo of disbelief that stung more than Claire's words ever could. By the time they began their descent into Miami, the twins' patience was paper-thin. Claire's tone hadn't softened. Her respect hadn't grown. And though the flight was flawless, she seemed determined to make sure they knew she didn't trust them. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Because waiting at the Miami hangar was someone she didn't expect, a tall man in a tailored navy suit, with silver streaks in his hair and confidence in his stride. Captain Raymond Ellis. The owner of the jet. The man whose name was stitched on every uniform. Claire adjusted her scarf nervously as the cabin door opened. She didn't recognize him, yet. But in moments, she would. And when she did, her world would flip upside down. Because prejudice may start with ignorance, but it always ends with truth. The moment the jet's wheels kissed the runway, Marcus felt relief wash through him. Another perfect flight. No turbulence, no errors, just precision. But beneath that calm surface, his stomach twisted. The air between him, Malik, and Claire was still thick with unspoken tension. As they taxied toward the private hangar, Claire stood by the cabin door, arms folded. Her expression was smug, as if daring them to make one wrong move. I'll handle the passengers, she said curtly, you two just do whatever it is you do. Malik's jaw tightened, but Marcus placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. Let it go, he murmured. We're almost done. The engines cooled. The passengers disembarked, offering polite nods of gratitude. Then came a new voice, deep, calm, commanding. Marcus. Malik. Both brothers turned. Their father stood at the bottom of the stairway, his tailored navy suit crisp, his presence magnetic. Captain Raymond Ellis didn't just walk, he owned every space he entered. Claire froze. Her smile faltered. She hadn't expected the owner to be black. Raymond climbed aboard, greeting his sons with quiet pride. Heard everything went smoothly, he said, shaking Marcus's hand. Then, his gaze shifted to Claire. And you must be the new attendant. Claire's throat went dry. Yes, sir. It was fine. The pilots handled it. He raised an eyebrow. The pilots? His tone sharpened, calm but edged. You mean my sons? Her eyes widened. Your sons? The cabin went silent. The weight of her disbelief hung heavy in the air. Yes, Raymond said, his voice low, deliberate. These are the men you questioned, the ones you doubted were qualified to sit in that cockpit. The ones you thought didn't belong. Claire's face drained of color. Sir, I didn't mean. Raymond stepped closer, his presence towering, not in anger, but in absolute control. You didn't mean to assume? You didn't mean to insult my company's pilots in front of our passengers? You didn't mean to question competence that far exceeds your understanding. Every word struck like thunder, measured, deliberate, impossible to escape. Malik looked down, his fists clenched. Marcus stood tall, emotion flickering in his eyes, not vengeance, just a quiet, aching vindication. Claire stammered, I was only following protocol. Raymond's expression hardened. Protocol? Then let me give you a new one. In this company, we don't judge by skin, by accent, or by assumptions. We judge by skill, integrity, and how people carry themselves under pressure. He let that hang in the air before adding softly, and you failed that test. The silence was deafening. Claire's lips trembled, but no apology could fix what had already been exposed. Finally, Raymond turned to his sons. Pack it in, boys. I'll handle the paperwork. Marcus nodded. Malik exhaled, the weight of the moment finally breaking the wall of restraint they'd built all day. As they stepped off the jet, the afternoon sun cut through the hangar windows, warm and blinding. For the first time that day, Marcus didn't feel small. He felt seen. Behind them, Claire stood alone in the cabin she thought she controlled, now nothing but quiet and consequence. Because sometimes, the loudest lesson is the one delivered in silence. The hangar was quiet after they left, just the echo of footsteps fading beneath the hum of the cooling engines. Marcus didn't say much. Neither did Malik. They didn't have to. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was heavy, full of everything they'd held back. For years, they'd learned to rise above it, to smile through doubt, to prove themselves twice as hard for half the respect. But today had been different. Today, they didn't have to defend who they were. The truth had done it for them. Later that evening, as the twins stood beside their father watching the sunset paint streaks of orange across the tarmac, Raymond placed a hand on each of their shoulders. You handled it right, he said quietly. You didn't lose control. You showed grace. That's strength, not because you stayed silent, but because you let your actions speak louder. Marcus nodded, eyes distant. It shouldn't have to be this way, Dad. I know, Raymond said. But every time we rise above hate, every time we stand tall instead of striking back, we shift something. Maybe just an inch. Maybe just one heart. But change always starts small. The next day, word spread through the company. Employees talked. Passengers who had witnessed the moment shared their stories online. Not the polished version, the real one. Photos of the twins in uniform went viral, captions reading, professional, calm, disrespected, and still dignified. Soon, the narrative flipped. What began as quiet humiliation turned into a lesson the entire airline industry couldn't ignore. Journalists picked up the story. Pilots from around the world sent messages of support. And even those who didn't know the Ellis family started asking themselves the same question: why did it take ownership to earn respect? Marcus scrolled through the comments that night, some supportive, some painful, but one stood out. It read, I showed this to my son. He said, Dad, I didn't know pilots could look like us. That's when Marcus realized something. The fight wasn't about proving they belonged, it was about making sure the next generation didn't have to. Claire, the flight attendant, quietly resigned weeks later. No scandal. No headlines. Just absence. But for Marcus and Malik, her face would always be a reminder, not of anger, but of awakening. Because sometimes, racism doesn't explode in violence, it hides behind politeness, behind just doing my job, behind disbelief that people of color can stand where power lives. The world saw two young men handle injustice with dignity, not fury. And in that silence, the loudest message was heard. Respect isn't something you give based on appearance, it's something earned by humanity. How many more brilliant, capable people are questioned, not because they can't, but because someone won't believe they can. And if respect must be proven, again and again, what does that say about the world we're still flying through? Because in the sky, every pilot breathes the same air. But on the ground, too many still struggle just to be seen.